Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Chelsea and I am a mum to Rose, who is 2.5. Today's video is going to be about breastfeeding, and I've uploaded so much about breastfeeding. I do have a breastfeeding playlist, so I will link it up here and also down below. I've got this pen in my hand because I've just been making notes about what I want to say in this video. The reason I'm doing this video was because I was having a conversation with my colleague about breastfeeding, latching and all of that stuff, and I was talking about how breastfeeding is sold as like this natural thing that mums and babies should be able to do, but there is a link between poor mental health and failure to breastfeed, and I think a lot of mums do experience that, including myself. Oh my goodness, I've got a cold. It's that time of year. Anyways, so I thought I would make a video about the truths about breastfeeding, and the first one is to say that breastfeeding is a skill. Okay, yes, it's natural. Yes, like your breasts make the milk ready for your baby, and that's a thing that happens naturally. You know, your body starts to produce milk once your baby is born, or actually before your baby is born. There's milk in there waiting for your baby, and then your baby knows how to suck. And if you've been to like antenatal classes, you must have seen that video where the baby is like on the mummy's tummy, and then it like on its own makes its way up to the breast and starts latching and feeding. And whilst that's amazing, that's not every mother's journey. So I just wanted to remind you, if you're thinking of breastfeeding, if you're watching this video as a mum who wasn't able to establish breastfeeding, or you had difficulty, or think of breastfeeding your second child, whatever the reason is that you're here, I want to remind you that breastfeeding is a skill that you're learning, a new skill at that, for you and your baby. And with each baby, it's going to be different. There's so many things that can influence whether or not your breastfeeding journey goes well. It can be down to if your baby has tongue tie. Do you have inverted nipples? Do you have access to like a lactation consultant? Is there any pressure around you breastfeeding? Are you breastfeeding because you can't afford formula? Are you breastfeeding because your baby has allergies? Like, there's so many things that can influence whether it comes naturally to you or not, because all the information out there will say that to be able to produce milk, not to be able to produce milk, but your milk production is more increased if you're relaxed and less stressed. And unfortunately, a lot of mothers don't have all of the good contributing factors that will make their breastfeeding journey be smooth and natural. I hope that makes sense. So just remember, if you're struggling or if you want to breastfeed and you're a new mum, it's a new skill for your baby that they're learning. It's also a new skill for you. And guess what? New skills take time to master. So if you're in the phase of really struggling, like with latching your baby or whatever you're struggling with breastfeeding, please remember that you're new to this, your baby's new to this, and you're both going to learn together. I've shared a lot about my breastfeeding journey on here, so I'm not going to go over it. Just look at my breastfeeding playlist and you can see about my breastfeeding journey. Got my trusty diary here. The second thing is, I would say, hand expressing is your best friend. So there are times where I just couldn't be bothered to put my pump in, so I had the Hacker. Again, go back and watch my breastfeeding videos if you haven't seen it, but the Hacker is just a silicone pump that you can attach to your breast, like when you're having letdown, or you can use it to hand express or to store milk or whatever temporarily until you put it into like a freezer bag in the freezer, not the fridge. So a lot of the time, like, I would just hand express. I found it quicker than like getting the pump on and then having to take the pump apart and sterilize it and just do all that. So I would literally just hold my breast and just hand a hand express into the Hacker and then store it that way, and I felt like it took less time. Now, I had a really great milk supply, so I was able to do that. I know for some mums, like, they would need to put the pump on to like really have a mechanical extraction of that milk, but I would say, yeah, if you've got a good milk supply and you find that you can hand express, go for it. I feel like it saves so much time, but however, this is my experience, not everyone else's experience, so that's just my suggestion. Next thing I would say, there's lots of information about establishing breastfeeding, but there's not a lot of information about stopping. That's what I found. Like, when I was ready to stop, like, I had to search Mumsnet. Shout out Mumsnet, because that's where I found my host of information about what mothers did when they were trying to stop breastfeeding, and most of the advice was to go cold turkey. And I did go cold turkey, not for day feeds but for night feeds, because I stopped breastfeeding altogether at 25 months. It was such a special journey, but towards the end I was hating it. So I said to myself, if I get to the point where I'm gonna start hating this, then it's time for me to be done, because I didn't want the journey to end on a sour note. It did, because I night weaned, and that was really hard. For night weaning, I just had to go cold turkey because I felt like my daughter was waking up too many times in the night, but there wasn't really any like information about stopping breastfeeding. That's what I found was my personal experience. Did you find that when you were trying to stop breastfeeding? Because I felt like that's what it was. So just be prepared that you might have to do extra research when it comes to stopping breastfeeding. We had already naturally reduced our day feeds, but it was the night feeds that was really the issue for me and for my daughter, because when I stopped night feeding, then she slept better for like a month, and then she goes back to not sleeping good. But anyways, that's another story for another day. Next thing that I'm about to say is for some people but not for all. But personally, my experience was that I lost my libido. I had no drive at all. Like, I was not interested in sex, and they say that breastfeeding can affect your libido. This is for some women, not all women, and there is research out there to back that. I will put it down below so that you can have a read if you want. So if your sex drive is low and your husband or your partner's like, why are you not getting it in, show them this article, and then they will be able to get a bit more context. But I never knew that your breastfeeding could affect like your libido. I just thought, I'm tired, whatever, but it does have an impact on your libido. It can, I want to say it does, I want to say it may, because obviously for some people, I had a conversation with another one of my colleagues and she was like, no girl, and she's had 5 kids. She's like, no, it didn't affect my libido, but for me it did. Next thing I would say is, you have to, like, for me personally, I had to structure my day around breastfeeding. So just be prepared that if you do breastfeed, like the early weeks and months are going to be structured around breastfeeding, pumping, making sure you don't get mastitis, establishing latching, establishing what position is best to feed your baby in. Have you had stitches? So do you have to feed your baby from the side? Do you have really big breasts? Or do you have to do a rugby hole? Like, there's so many things that it will take over your life, okay? Let's just be honest here. For the first couple of weeks and months, your life will be around feeding your baby. Is it time to feed them yet? My breast feel full. Do I need to pump? Do I need to do this? Like, it can be quite exhausting, but what I would say is that once you get into the flow of things, then it's easy. It's so convenient. Like, I'm promoting it even though it was long. Like, I put a lot of hours and time into breastfeeding, and that leads me to my next point. You will spend hundreds of hours breastfeeding your baby. It depends how long you breastfeed for, but I breastfed until my daughter was 25 months. Just bear in mind, for the first 10 months, my daughter woke up every 3 hours to feed. I don't even know how much time that is in hours, but that is a lot of time and dedication to breastfeeding. And I just want you to be prepared that if you're a mum, your baby might not wake every 3 hours, okay? That's just my experience, but just know that you will have to give up your body, yourself. Like, when you're pregnant, you obviously give up your body and yourself to your baby to make a home for your baby. But then if you decide to breastfeed, you give up your body in that way, that you are obviously feeding your baby from your nipples. And if you can't get them to take a bottle, then it's even more intense. I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm just trying to say, be prepared for that self-sacrifice of breastfeeding for the first initial weeks and months. It can take a lot out of you. If you can get your baby to take a bottle, I don't know if it helps or not, because I feel like you still have to pump and then do the pump, and it's exhausting. But for me, I would say it was worth it. Like, breastfeeding was our time to just have the most wonderful bond, and she stares in my eyes, I stare at her, she's suckling, and we're just having the best time ever. I would know that she would always fall asleep when I breastfed her. Like, it was the trick up until like 18 months to get her back to sleep in the night. After that, it stopped working. But yeah, be prepared to sacrifice a lot of time. And the last thing I would say is, it gets easier. I wanted to end this video on a positive note. I haven't said negative things. I think I've just given a realistic view of breastfeeding, but it does get easier. For me, it got easier in the fact that I could just whip out my boob anywhere, anytime, and feed my baby when she needed it. When she was sick, I could feed her. And that's one thing I do miss, because I'm not breastfeeding anymore, and she, first of all, she didn't get a cold until she was 7 months, so I feel like that's quite good. Maybe because she didn't go to nursery, but also because I was breastfeeding, and obviously your body makes antibodies in your milk to combat any illnesses and sicknesses that your baby may have. So I do miss that element of being able to feed her when she's sick, because she's had chicken pox, I was still feeding when she had chicken pox, but she's had loads of different things, like, you know, children are always getting ill, and I miss like being able to just stick her on my boob and know that my body is going to produce that special milk for her. But it does get easier. It gets easier like when they start on solids. It gets easier once they're a bit, I was going to say once they're a bit more mobile, because like they're moving around as much, so maybe they're not paying as much attention to the breast. But once they get more mobile, then they try to start doing gymnastics whilst you're breastfeeding them. But we're talking about the positives here. We're ending on a good note. As they get older, they also, in my experience, I know this is not all mums' experience, they feed less. They're weaning, they're busy exploring the world, seeing other things, and the demand is not as much as in those early days. So I'm going to leave it on that note. If you've got any questions or you want to share your experience down below, then feel free to do that. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!